Welcome back to Fresh Movie Recaps. Today, we are going to explain a 2023 movie called The Equalizer 3, featuring Denzel Washington. The movie kicks off in Sicily, Italy. A car is cruising through the distant farmlands, and inside the car, a man named Lorenzo Vitali, a crime lord, is driving with his grandson. As he approaches a winery, he sees lifeless bodies all around. He parks his car and notices one of his subordinates outside, visibly upset and unable to speak. Without uttering a word, he readies a pistol and instructs his son to remain in the car. With a sense of dread, he enters the building, discovering a gruesome scene of his men brutally murdered throughout the hallways, drenched in blood. His journey leads him to the basement, where he encounters three of his associates holding Robert McCall at gunpoint. Vitali asks McCall what he is doing there, and he says he was there for something that they had taken that wasn't theirs. McCall gives them 9 seconds to return what they had taken, and without a reply, he proceeds to use the enemy's gun to kill 2 of his men and use the third one as a human shield while he lets off a shot at Lorenzo as the crime boss crawls for safety. As Vitali desperately crawls for safety, he seizes a shotgun and delivers a fatal blast to Vitali's head before making off with his keys. Meanwhile, as McCall is departing with a bag, the grandson spots him, prompting McCall to instruct him to remain in the car. However, the young boy shoots McCall in the leg and flees. Injured, McCall initially takes a seat but eventually drives until he loses consciousness. He is discovered unconscious in his vehicle by Gio Benucci, a police officer, who transports him to the local doctor, Enzo Verizio, in their town. Enzo instructs Gio to explain that McCall fell if anyone inquires about his condition. McCall wakes up after a few days, and Enzo asks him if he saved a good man or a bad man, and Robert barely says he doesn't know. He later learns he is in the town of Altamont. He befriends Enzo, who finds a place for him to stay. Enzo tells him he's been out of it for 3 days and directs him to go for a walk if he wants. He finally musters the strength to go for a walk with the help of a cane, studying the local community. McCall goes to the local cafe where he befriends one of the employees, Amina, and he also becomes friendly with Gio and his daughter, Gabby. McCall later contacts the CIA and speaks to Emma Collins. He tips her off about what he found at the vineyard in Sicily and suggests she investigate. He is haunted by images of his late friend, Susan Plummer, and he remembers how he took out the men at the vineyard one by one with little to no effort, but he doesn't even recognize himself at this point. The following day he finds himself having some lunch at the cafe when a man walks into the shop and takes an envelope from the owner. McCall watches him hand it to some bikers, and Amina comes over with some coffee and introduces herself to him. Over the next few days, he seems to be getting quite friendly with the locals, but yet again he sees the bikers collecting more protection money from shops. A shop owner named Angelo is in conversation with Marco Corrent, the brother of the mafia's leader. Angelo reveals his inability to meet the mafia's financial demands due to a slow week in business. This unfortunate circumstance leads to Angelo enduring a brutal assault, all while Robert stands outside, bearing witness to the ordeal. Marco eventually emerges from the scene, encountering the most intimidating gaze in history. Marco visits Vincent, who runs the Camorra, a mafia group that terrorizes Altamont. He is meeting with a couple that refuses to sign over their building so that Vincent may run a hotel. He responds by having the wife's wheelchair-bound father thrown and hung from a window, as a warning for others. McCall goes down to Angelo's shop to grab some fish for Enzo. Business seems as per usual, and they laugh at his new hat. Angelo refuses to take money off him and tells him it's on the house. Collins goes with her partner, Frank Conroy, with their team, and they find 11 million euros along with a huge stash of narcotics. Vincent tells his brother that he will have more work to do, but he reveals his plans to commercialize the town Altamont with state-of-the-art casinos and resorts. Returning to Enzo's residence, McCall prepares to depart for the United States, packing his belongings. As he's about to leave, he's alerted by the sound of screaming and a rush of people heading toward Angelo's shop, which is engulfed in flames. Angelo's despair is evident as his livelihood goes up in flames. Enzo comforts Angelo and his wife. In the midst of this chaos, Robert observes the scene and, upon turning around, notices Marco and his goons observing from a distance. Collins later locates McCall in Altamonte and starts communicating with him over what they found at the vineyard. Gio gets a phone call saying that Gabby left school early, and when he asks her teacher, she says one of his officers took her. Gio runs home and finds Gabby and his wife Kiera being held captive by Marco and his goons. Before they proceed to beat him up and threaten his family so he can stay out of their business. When McCall sees Gio at Enzo's place, he asks what happened to him, but Enzo tells him about the mafia and how they operate, that they are like cancer with no cure. McCall then begins training, and during this, he finds Collins awaiting his arrival. She tells him that he's a ghost and is no longer a person of interest, just an interesting person. She also tells him about Vincent and his mafia and wants to know why he chose to call her of all people. He replies by saying, "Why Italy? It is one of the most secure ports in the world. It's clearly not the ideal place." At night, Officer Gio is eating dinner with his family. Unexpectedly, they get some uninvited guests, which join their table. Marco starts asking Gio for favors and tells him he is going to work for him now. Marco sees McCall eyeing him out and walks towards his table. He tells him to stop messing himself and other people's business. He then replies by telling Marco that it is pure coincidence he is still in Sicily and that Marco messed up. They find it funny that an old man is challenging them, but he isn't playing around. He distracts Marco long enough to grab his arm before breaking his wrist. He forces Marco's men to stay put and literally makes Marco a humiliated joke in front of everyone at the restaurant. He forces the others to leave, tells Marco's gun on the table, and makes him walk away all humiliated. But the humiliated man isn't too happy and tells his goons to get the van and be ready for war. Waiting outside, a van out of nowhere crashes into one of his men and connects him to a wall. Everyone inside the van is dead, and Robert whacks one with a bottle to sleep. Marco pulls a knife on him, but within a few seconds, he breaks his arm and kills him with his own knife by a pissed-off McCall. He walks away as if nothing ever happened. The next day, police swarm the crime scene, and Gio sees his tormentor dead. It turns out that the same pills in the winery made their way into Marco's van. Collins sees a news report of a terrorist attack in Rome, believed to be done by Syrian terrorists, based on what she has learned from McCall. She doesn't believe this was the work of Syrians, even though it was their drugs found at the vineyard. She confides to Conroy that she believes this is part of a bigger plan. Collins also ends up caught near an explosion in the city as she attempts to go near her car, but she is alive and hospitalized. When Frank visits her at the hospital, she tells him it's the Kimura they are looking for, not the terrorists. After Vincent learns of his brother's death, he plans to revenge. Scene cuts to an entourage transporting Vincent through Sicily. He and his goons go to Altamonte. They attack Gio. He yells at the top of his lungs for everyone to come out. As they do so, he tells them to bring his brother's killer, firing a gun near his ear and threatening to kill him and his family until his brother's murderer shows up. McCall reveals himself from the shadows with dual-wielded guns that are not loaded and tells Vincent to take him and to leave everyone else alone because he is the one who killed his brother. Before Vincent can kill McCall, Enzo fires a rifle of his own. The residents then get their phones out and record the villains, forcing them to flee. Vincent returns to his compound and begins to make plans to attack Altamont the next day. Unfortunately for them, McCall has found them first and begins to pick them off. Vincent wakes up when one of his goons' blood drips on him from the ceiling before the body crashes through the glass. Vincent tries to run away but ends up knocked out by McCall. When he wakes up, He finds that McCall has given him a lethal dose of the drugs found at the vineyard, giving him a few minutes before his heart gives out. Vincent attempts to run into the street with McCall slowly walking behind him, and he ends up hit by a car. The crime lord stumbles a little further before he finally dies. Later, McCall pays a visit to the hospital where Collins is staying. He confides in her, disclosing that his true motive for coming to Sicily was to recover stolen pension funds on behalf of someone he knew. McCall leaves the bag filled with money in Collins' care. She subsequently travels to Boston, the residence of the individual McCall was referring to. Both the man and his wife are deeply moved and thankful to discover that their money has been retrieved. Upon Collins' return to work, McCall surprises her with a small black book detailing his personal gatherings, accompanied by a note that reads, "Your mother would be so proud of you." This moment prompts Collins to glance at a photograph on her desk, revealing her identity as Susan's daughter. Meanwhile, McCall remains in Altamonte and joins the celebrations as they rejoice in their football team's victory.